Welcome back, bigots. Have you heard of the Stop Killing Games initiative? I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to not hear about it, as it's being splattered all over news media, all over the internet, and elsewhere. And for good reason. Recently, a petition was initiated, which now has garnered over 1 million signatures. And that creates a problem. That problem being the tightening of the digital noose around the necks of gamers. You see, gamers have a conundrum on their hands. We want to be able to keep playing the games we like and buy without the fear of that game's server being unplugged and no longer accessible. We would just love for gaming to return to its physical roots, but that is in strict opposition to the studios who have realized digitization is the groundwork to relieve gamers of owning the games that they buy. I mean, why allow gamers to own something they buy when studios and corporations can force customers into a, rentable service structure, like being a landlord? Well, that concept is clearly illustrated in this reply from this article here. We can read, "We appreciate the passion of our community." Right. However, the decision to discontinue online services is multifaceted, never taken lightly, and must be an option for companies when an online experience, here comes the important part, is no longer commercially viable. Now, wait, I think you can pretty much assume that money has always been the bottom line here, but really, that's not a surprise, and it's not really an attack on them, but we can all see where this is going. I think we can all agree that businesses are out to make money, but it's how they're going about it which makes this situation totally avoidable. The EU lobby further explains their perspective in the same article, as it says, or as it states, I should rather say. Private servers are not always a viable alternative option for players, as the protections we put in place to secure players' data, remove illegal content, and combat unsafe community content would not exist, and would leave rights holders liable. In addition, many titles are designed from the ground up to be online only. Now, again, let me stop you right there. I would like to emphasize that part of the quote that I highlighted in yellow. Designed from the ground up to be online only? Well, that's another big problem. Not just for gamers, but for developers as well. How? Well, because eventually, developers will have to face the fact that most games they make are intentionally online only, which automatically applies an expiration date on that game. Haven't any of these studios figured that out yet? I'll put it this way. It appears that a lot of these studios are clout chasing. And hard. They want a piece of that Fortnite success pie, but life doesn't work out that way. You can't force-feed success. And certainly not every game needs to be online only. Gamers have been crystal clear about their wishes. They don't mind a game being retired to the digital graveyard in the sky, but what gamers are requesting is the ability to self-host servers. If the studios are either uninterested or incapable of maintaining their older games, they should have zero complaints in handing off that duty to the gaming and modding community. This seems rather convenient for the studio and beneficial to the gamers. If the studios are planning to put a certain game out to pasture, well, why not leave those games in the hands of eager gamers willing to preserve those games? These logical questions and arguments lead me to a pertinent question, which is, why are these studios acting so incomprehensibly irrational? There's nothing to gain from letting these games die. That is, nothing but control over how and when you, my dear viewer, get to play the games you buy. As I was writing the script for this very video, Pirate Nation posted something rather interesting. He says, Video Games Europe, a trade association representing major game publishers like Riot Games, Ubisoft, or I like to pronounce it Ubisoft because it's funny. Anyway, and Activision Blizzard has published a position paper opposing the Stop Killing Games initiative. And they aren't very happy about it. And he writes a few key claims. But instead of just going through his key claims, which you can always pause and read for yourself, I would like to read some of the counterclaims myself. So let's do that together, shall we? Here's one of them. The right to decide how, when, and for how long to make an online video game services available to players is vital in justifying the cost and fostering continued technical innovation. As rights holders and economic entities, I really hate those people, but never mind. Video games companies must remain free to decide when an online game is no longer commercially viable and to end continued server support for that game. So here's the problem I have with this argument. What they're saying is, if you read between the lines, that is that they wish to maintain full control over when they pull the plug. Why? Because they want to force gamers into a rentable relationship, as I previously mentioned, whereby they can reintroduce a sequel with minimal effort, but at maximum cost. Think Overwatch 2. If I'm not making sense, allow me to explain it again. They want to control the length of time you are allowed, and I'm using air quotes there, allowed, to play their games. That way, if you want to continue playing it, you'll just have to wait until their next sequel. That may or may not be as good, or as fun, or as compatible with you in any other way as the previous iteration was. Again, they want you to pay for their sequels indefinitely. You can't tell me this isn't how they plan on operating, or, at the very least, they haven't thought of that yet. They're hoping you're dumb enough to just eat up the sequels nonstop. Let's continue with that same rebuttal article that the European Union wrote up, or the European video game people. The right to decide how, when, and how long to make an online game. Right, so we went through all of that. So immediately after that entire paragraph is this statement. Imposing a legal obligation to continue server support indefinitely or to develop online video games in a specific technical manner that will allow permanent use will raise the cost and risks of developing such games, so on and so forth. So, I highlighted the first few words because that's where the lie is. Imposing a legal obligation to continue server support indefinitely. We're not asking you, the developers, to do that. I mean, that would be nice if you would do that. But we're not asking you to do that. We're asking you to allow us to do that. We're asking that we carry that responsibility. You want to know why they're so adamant about keeping us from doing this, by the way? Control. If we manage their old games, then we can pretty much do whatever we want with it. Which could, potentially, that would mean we might do a better job at servicing their old games than they would. Think about that for a hot minute. Now, here's another quote. While there are video game companies that have elected to enable their online games to live beyond that is being proposed, their commercial viability, this is, and must always be, a matter of choice, as it will depend on what is reasonable and appropriate for the specific game, games company, and audience. Okay, this is an entirely different conversation we should be having. Are we talking about online games? That is, like games as a service games? Or are we talking about single-player campaign games? There is a massive difference between the two. Single-player games will demand far less maintenance than online-only games. Further on into their reply, article, argument, whatever you want to call it, They have numbered responses to seemingly, legitimate concerns that you should totally read for yourself and come to your own conclusions about it, because it is multifaceted and it employs a lot of nuance. But suffice it to say, I don't think the majority of their arguments hold any weight, because their plan is to remove the game from existence. If that's their goal, then they shouldn't care what we do with the games then. It'll be out of their hands anyways, right? So what's it to them? This video would go on forever, believe me, if I went over every single detail of their reply. So, if that's something you want me to do, let me know in the comments below and I'll do it. Otherwise, I think it's time for me to wrap this up. But I will summarize by saying this. It's clear that these studios and corporations don't sincerely care about the games themselves. They're looking out for their bottom line. That's pretty clear. Which, again, I can understand. Business is business. But the fact of the matter is, we're looking for a way to salvage what is going to be thrown away. So, why not just let us do that? Here's an example I want to share as an example for my argument. Look at the modders and indie developers behind the Oblivion remake and the Morrowind remake. I'm sure you've heard of them, Sky Oblivion and Skywind. There is a level of passion and tenacity that these corporations lack. These indie devs, these modders, are passionate about saving these games and applying newer technology to breathe a little bit of new life into these games. That is what the gaming community is willing to do for all of these other games. So why not just allow us to do it? And I'm sure, I am 100% positive that all of the details can be ironed out in a reasonable manner. But I think the reason why they don't want to come to the table really and actually sincerely discuss the details is they don't want to give up control. It's literally that simple. Until next time, guys, I want you to go ahead and go ahead and subscribe, do all the fun, happy, social stuff. Again, as always, you can always find me on Gab. I'm a fun guy. Hit me up there. I'm also on Odyssey. And I am thinking about doing my little party stream very soon, probably next Tuesday. And I'll probably do it on Kick. So I'll leave a message on X when it gets closer to the time for me to do that and piece all that together. So until next time, guys, have fun.